talk about it right here. We gonna talk about everything you like. I'ma make it real, real clear. It's Tynee Talks right here. We gonna talk about it right here. I'ma talk about everything you like. I'ma make it real, real clear, cause it's Tynee Talks. And I'ma talk about it. Yeah, cause it's Tynee Talks. And I'ma talk about it. And welcome to the Tynee Talks podcast, the podcast where you come to laugh and learn, the podcast that also educates and entertains. Today's show is brought to you by 810 Taco Seasoning. 810 Taco Seasoning is packed with 9 delicious flavors that are high in flavor and low in sodium. Remember, 810 Taco Seasoning is made for tacos, but delicious on everything. So you can put it on your meats, your treats, or whatever, and you'll be sure to spice up your Taco Tuesday nights. Visit 810tacos.com. That's 810tacos.com. Use code Tynee Talks Tacos, and you'll receive free shipping off all orders over $20. Today, I have a wonderful guest joining me today. You can see I'm smiling from ear to ear, from east to west, because I have a fantastic guest on the show today. She is the author of the book, Token Black Girl. And y'all know I'm all about uplifting Black women and Black girls, and her journey and her story is just phenomenal. I'm going to give you a little brief on her, and she's going to tell you the rest. But her name is Danielle Prescod, not to be thinking Prescott, it's Prescod with a D. And Danielle is a 15-year veteran in the beauty and fashion industry, and she is a graduate of NYU's Gallatin School of Individualized Study, which means she specialized her degree in all things fashion. She is the fashion guru. She's worked at some of your favorite brands, including Vogue, and most recently, she was the style director of BET.com. So without further ado, welcome Ms. Danielle Prescod.
Hi. Thanks
Hello.
for having me.
Pardon me?
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it is such a pleasure because this book is like Black girl magic, Black girl just all things cool, because you went through quite a journey, with your identity and, Blackness and whiteness and white supremacy and all those things. But at the end of the day, you are a beautiful Black queen, and we're going to get into it. So tell my audience, for those who don't know you, a little bit about your background and how you got into the fashion industry.
Sure. I had always really loved magazines. I mean, I loved reading everything. And so magazines were like a big form of escapism for me. And I just thought that, wow, I can't believe that this exists. Like, they would give advice, which I thought, I was really searching for a lot of things in my youth. So I loved like how sure, the words seemed within magazines. There was a lot of research involved when they reported articles, and the imagery was also so beautiful. And so I lost myself in those pages a lot. And I wanted to work in a magazine because I wanted to be a writer. And I didn't know that there were other people responsible for the other things that were in a magazine besides the words. And so when I got my first internship, that kind of opened my eyes to the fact that there's a whole photo department, and there's a features department, and there's a fashion department, and there's a beauty department, and there's an art department, and there's so many different, ways to contribute to like making this thing happen. And so when I got my first internship, I was 18 years old, and I was reporting to the executive editor. And she would give me tasks, and I would finish them so early and so quickly because I was so passionate. And I didn't realize that like some of it was busy work. Like, they were just like, please get out of our faces so we can actually do work that you can't help with.
Right.
And the fashion closet always seemed really busy, and like they needed extra hands. So I just started like volunteering to help in there. And turns out they actually did need help. So, and that's how I found out that, people are responsible for putting these outfits together, and someone decides what the person on the cover wears and also what the models wear. So that is how I discovered that that was a career path and I wanted to go down it. And then I swung back around full circle and decided, I'm just kidding, I want to write again.
And that's what led to the Token Black Girl book, because you missed the joy and thrill of writing. When you were growing up, what were some of your favorite magazines?
I read everything and anything. When I was like a very young kid, it was like YM was a big one that I really
Mm-hmm.
liked. And then Teen Vogue came out, and I put this in the book, I think in 2002 or 3 was the first issue.
I think it was '02, and I only know that because my grandma got me a subscription, and I was in
Mhm.
love.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really big one. And then, as I got older, I started graduating to reading Vogue and Marie Claire and Elle and InStyle, and even some international magazines like ID. Um, so I would read anything I could get my hands on.
Yeah, what I loved also about Teen Vogue is that they also had real articles in there about like things that girls or women across the globe were going through, and not just fashion and beauty. They would just have like articles about like world events. So I really appreciated that, because I was also like a bookworm. So I read everything: Teen Vogue, Teen Mag, Jet, Ebony, Essence, the whole nine. So before we go into more questions, the book is called Token Black Girl. But for my reader, my listeners out there who might not know what a token Black girl is, or a token Black girl person is, Danielle, how would you define token Black girl or token Black? How would you define that?
I think it's complex because you can be tokenized on like an individual level, but then also on an institutional level. And so I would say at the institutional level, tokenization like serves as a signal to external parties that you are an accepting institution, that everybody has a place at your institution, except that there's never usually more than one person of color, and whatever that might be. So you can have a token brown girl, a token Latinx girl, you can have a token Asian girl, you can have a token Black girl, but it's only when, that identity becomes your only trait and characteristic that is valuable to the institution, that it is problematic. And also that you're usually, like I said, the only one.
Mm-hmm.
And then on an individual level, it also works similarly, but usually it's demonstrating that there is a power dynamic that the tokenized person doesn't have access to. So it's that their identity becomes what is useful in the group setting to signal like, hey, we're accepting of people, like we're not racist. However, your acceptance is usually predicated upon you being able to assimilate to the dominant culture, which is
Mm-hmm.
usually whiteness.
True indeed. Kendra Payne wrote an article called Grew Up as the Token Black Kid, um, and Finding Your Voice. And she defines the token Black person as being the person, the only insert whatever to that, in a sea full of white people. So you're the only, and then you're plucked out to be, tokenized in that sense. And as you said, the dominant culture is what rules that particular area, and then you have to follow that. You going outside of that norm no longer makes you the token. Then when you go outside of the norm that has been systemically placed there, then you could particularly become an enemy of the state, or
Yeah.
or enemy against what those norms are, if you try to go against it.
Yeah, they
um
call that trajectory pet to threat. So
mm,
when you are the pet, it is like you behave in the way that is acceptable, that people, it's expected, that it's not threatening. And then if you stray from that behavior, you all of a sudden become a threat.
True indeed. Pet to threat. Whew, that's one. That's one that I've seen that materialize in my own eyes, in
Of
my own
course.
experience of going from pet to threat. And I like Chesley Ramsey. She used to have a thing that's a little YouTube short that said stuff white people say, or stuff black girls say, stuff white girls say.
Mhm.
And she used to have a little bit that said, not to sound racist, and then it was preceded by something that was absolutely racist.
Oh, yeah.
And so because of that, it's like if you go along with it and you laugh and you don't stop it right there and say, hey, that actually was racist, immediately that transition from pet to threat can happen, because it's like, what are you doing? Why are you questioning me? Why are you doing that? Why are
Mhm.
you making me feel uncomfortable,
Mhm.
although they spent 10 minutes making you feel uncomfortable?
Totally.
So my number one question is, what inspired you to write Token Black Girl? I know you mentioned in the book, but there are some people who haven't read the book, and I really want them to read the book, because your story, your path is just it's cool. And I love that you became enlightened on your path. You could have stayed, essentially, and not to disrespect you in any way, but you could have stayed the pet because you were the pet in a long time in your life, particularly your childhood and in your teens. But
Yeah.
then the light bulb clicked for you, and you were like, hey, no, a threat to them is a threat to me. How you're perceiving them is how you're perceiving me. So what inspired you to write the book and for that light bulb to kind of click for you?
I think that, everyone's on their own individual journeys. And for me, I had really been working with my therapist on exploring what self love meant and self care. And because I had worked in the fashion and beauty industries, both of those terms had been like extremely commodified. So it's like, if you want to show your self love, like buy yourself flowers, like, right? That's like the number one song in America right now,
Yeah.
right? The song's called Flowers, and it's like, I can buy my own flowers. So I mean, I developed this habit that was that I would buy my own flowers and I would arrange them in my house every single week. I was spending like, I don't even know, like $50 or more a week on fresh flowers. It was so
Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot.
and I'm like, okay, I don't really feel any better. And I really couldn't understand what was making me not have this mythical self-love that my therapist was insisting I needed. And
Mhm,
but that was because of the messaging that I like received in my professional life, that like, if you go on vacation, that's self-love. If you, go to yoga class, that's self-love. If you
mhm,
buy yourself the shoes, that's self-love. And like, it's not, has nothing to do with that. But
right.
because they had constructed this image of myself that was like so um so predicated on like what I owned, what I had, where I worked, look, the
Mhm,
jobs that I occupied. So I was like, I don't know why I still don't love myself. And so
mm,
once I started like peeling back the layers, a lot of it had to do with like media reception,
mhm,
um, and how affected I was by like certain media. And I was like, yeah, but okay, am I seeing enough Black love interests? Am I seeing enough people who look like me celebrated as special, as for who they are and not for like what they contribute to an institution?
mhm,
And I wasn't really. And I was like, okay, so maybe I can like work backwards and see where some of this started. And I ended up at like white supremacy. That's where all of it started, right?
mhm,
And me not understanding that, right? And like also being a child in a system that I truly did not understand.
mm,
And So I think I went through a lot. I had to like do a lot of like self forgiveness as well.
Mm-hmm.
I had to forgive myself for the things that I did not know and like the things I didn't know how to say or communicate and
Mm-hmm.
feelings I didn't know how to communicate, because that's all also part of the self love process. Like you can't have self love without self forgiveness as well.
Mm.
So, anyway, that's how I ended up writing the book.
That is so good. I love that you said that you had to forgive yourself for what you didn't know, because once you came into the know of certain things, like again, the white supremacy, saying that this particular body size is the normal body size, or this type of skin, or this, colorism, getting on the spectrum, the fairer skin to the darker skin, what is best. And you're like, well, I subscribe to these things and I thought that they were the end all be all, the cat's meow. So you like had to go back and to forgive yourself, to say, hey, I was perpetuating the same things that was causing someone else not to love themselves.
Well, yeah. And I think that what most people don't understand is just how pervasive white
Mhm.
supremacy is, and that it touches every single part of your life.
Mhm.
And it is just kind of like parroted back to people. So, for example, um, the obesity scale, right, is
Mhm.
based on a study that was done for white men in Europe and never again replicated for any other race, any other place. But it is what the medical field uses to determine quote unquote
Mhm.
health for people. And it's like, it still affects everybody to this day. So I recently went to the doctor and she was like, oh, well, you are chronically obese. And I was like, but why would I be obese?
Yeah.
And I'm like, and my doctor's a Black woman, right? And
Mhm.
10 years of medical school. And I'm
Mhm.
looking at her and she's looking at me. And I'm like, well, I can't believe we're in this theater where like this cloud of white supremacy is still between us.
Mhm.
I forget what the test is. Ugh. Anyway, there's this test where it's a feminist test,
Mhm.
demonstrate that the patriarchy is also always present.
Permeated in the fabric of everything. Yeah.
So even when we are two women having a conversation, patriarchy is still here. And that is like also how racism functions as well. And without realizing it, we are interacting with it on a daily basis, sometimes an hourly basis.
Mhm.
And it really requires like so much unpacking. And yeah, if you are educated in a certain way, if you interact with people in a certain way like that, it might never come up. Like there are so many forces right now even
Mhm.
dedicated to making sure people never know these
Mhm.
truths ever, right?
Mhm.
And they don't want to talk about it and they don't want it out there. And so you almost have to like fight to figure out this information. And
Yeah.
that's also really hard. And not everyone does that either. So you have to forgive yourself for
Mhm.
like this system is working on you completely outside of your control.
Completely. I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's something that my husband and I talk about often. He is a history teacher. He teaches U.S. history, African American history as well, and he was educated in African psychology as well. So he's always looking on how white supremacy affects us. And you brought a very real example of how you could have a Black doctor talking to a Black patient, and then the overarching is white supremacy with this. And I was just having that conversation recently. It's like every couple of months we're having these conversations. There's a new rest in peace or hashtag, and most recently Tyree Nichols, God bless the dead. And, now the scuttlebutt is, well, he was beat by, Black cops. Black cops beat him. So it's Black on Black crime. And it's like, okay, no, because they're agents of the state, and the history of policing is against Black human beings. They were just carrying out another act of white supremacy. It's just like the miseducation of the Negro. If I've been telling you to go to the back door, I no longer have to tell you to go to the back door anymore. You're going to do it. instantaneously. It's innate, it's in you. So they're just carrying out the act that says, hey, Black people that look like this, when we're all wearing blue, our targets are Black people. So that's who you target. So to your point, yes, they're carrying out white supremacy, and you have to literally deprogram yourself to get over it.
Yes. And it has to be like intentional because
Mhm.
again, like it's not going to be given to you at school.
Mm-mm.
It's not going to be given to you at work.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is something that you are going to have to seek out
Yeah.
on your own. And that's
Yeah.
also really unfortunate too, because I think that one of the unfair things about white supremacy is that, it's that Black people have this innate knowledge. And I'm like, we're drinking the same poison water well that you are. It's like we don't know necessarily any better. We can talk amongst ourselves, but like,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, it needs to be something that is so normalized
Mm-hmm.
that like that's just what we're learning. Just like when you tell a baby their ABCs, right? Like these things
Mm-hmm.
are like we've all agreed that this is what kids say 2 + 2 = 4,
Yeah.
right? But if you ask, I mean, there's tons of like TikTok videos. Like if you ask a kid being like, can you name 3 countries in Africa? And they're a white kid, they can't. And sometimes in some of these schools, Black kids can't either,
Yeah,
right?
because they're not taught.
They're
It's
being
not the
educated at
mainstream.
the same place.
Yeah, yeah, they're being indoctrinated in public schools. In public schools, their mission is to create workers, which fuels capitalism, which fuels classism, which
Yeah,
fuels racism, and it gets so deep,
it's so
and,
deep.
and it could go. I mean, it goes on and on and on, and people. You had a quote in your book just to that point, and you say, which one is it? Oh yes, this is a great quote. You say, when Black people bring up racism in this context, right, even in the context that we're speaking about it now, how it plays a role in just ignorance of all the races,
Mhm.
they are told that they are being paranoid, or they need to lighten up, or worse still, that not everything is about race. So instead, we just absorb all that negativity. We swallow it and smile at lavishly decorated dinner tables with people who have racist conversations privately while publicly standing for equality. And whew, blown away, because right now we're in a war in education about CRT, critical race theory, which has been around for a long time, but now for some reason it is just blown up, and it's in a way that says, hey, we want to keep it cute. We want to say diversity. We want to pluck out the token Black girl, the token Latinx girl, the token Asian girl, and say, hey, we've met our quota, and throw in a little LGBTQ plus. And we want to say we met our quota. But when we start to have those real deepening conversations, it's like, hey, you're taking this a little too far, and we want to keep it on a surface level. And that is the hardship that we, as the tokens, sometimes we're forced into the token Black person role, where we have to kind of swallow it, for our livelihood, so that we can have a place to work, so that we're not stirring up the pot, so that we're not looked at as crazy, even though it's the truth.
I know. And that's what's really weird to like know these things, but then to be convinced, one thing that I think racism does or white supremacy does is like convince you not to trust yourself. That
Mm,
I really, and that's why there's so much external research infused with the memoir part of my book. Cause I was like,
mhm,
I can't stand on just people saying, yeah, that's exactly what happened. They won't trust me and then they'll convince me to not trust me.
mhm,
That's really dangerous. So I was like, okay, well, since I do know this is true, I will also demonstrate these concepts by showing what happened to other people,
mhm.
other industries across the world,
Yeah,
so that you understand that it's not just something I'm saying.
right. And it's not just an isolated incident.
Yeah.
It is prevalent. And I want to just thank you, Danielle, for your bravery. because you were brave enough to speak about this. Where I don't know if you mentioned this in the book, but I'll ask you, did when before you published this book, did people say this is going to be career suicide? Why are you doing this? Why are you putting it on blast?
No, but only because I had already career suicided myself. Um, so, yeah, I left mainstream women's publications in 2016 and I went to work at BET.
Mm-hmm.
And I detail this in the book, but the transition from working in mainstream media to like BET just further highlighted the racism of the industry, because like all of a sudden, like certain access that I always had was like revoked or changed.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
Yeah, I remember that part. And I remember
Right? I'm like, I
I
just,
was just at this brunch last year. Really?
yeah, yeah. And so I was very outspoken then
Mhm.
about racism, and how it was affecting me and my ability to do my job. Like, and I'm
Mhm.
like, and unfortunately, like even working at a Black brand, like did not save me from having to interact with racism, because um, we are having to fight now for access and for talent
Mhm.
and for opportunities that like I was just given blindly when I worked
Mhm.
at mainstream publication. So I had already been quite annoying to people, I guess I would say,
Yeah.
for many years. So yeah, I don't think that it's something that the book was the thing that was the career suicide. I was like, I think that happened ages ago.
Yeah. That's true. What prevalent myths and truths are associated with being a token Black girl that you would say?
I think what's really challenging about being the token Black girl is that there are myths on both sides, right?
Mhm.
So if you are a Black person who occupies a white space, you have to deal with like the myths and pre-assumptions of white community. And
Mhm.
then you also have to simultaneously deal with the myths and pre-assumptions of the Black community.
Mhm.
So, I don't know, like people like say just really insensitive stuff all the time.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I witnessed it a lot when the Meghan and Harry documentary came out,
Mhm.
because Meghan Markle said something like, yeah, like I never really had to think about it. Like I
Mhm.
never had to think about my race and how it affected me. And people were just like, that is so impossible. I don't understand. Like, how this like, I was like, I actually think it's very possible. And
Mhm.
I'm like, first of all, I don't understand like what benefit would she be lying about this at this point?
Mhm.
Doesn't really make sense. But
Mhm.
even if we're like going to like accept it as like partially true, I'm like, there was still a world in like the 90s and like 2000s where simply like the presence of Blackness was enough to be like, oh, racism is done. I mean, it happened when
Mhm.
Obama was elected. Oh, racism is over.
Mhm.
We're
This
good
quote
now.
unquote post-racial America, which is so false. It's so false.
So like, we're good now. And I also think that it was so many discussions that made people uncomfortable. And one of the things you're trained to do as a tokenized person of color is just not talk about it because it makes people uncomfortable. So these things are true or like happening, but you can't say that, right?
Mhm.
And because it's not safe for you. And so
Mhm.
you just learn to be really quiet about things. And that makes the Black community be like, oh, you're a sellout, X, Y, and Z. Like, I even get a lot of criticism. People are like, you just started talking about this in 2020. I can't believe that. And I'm like, would you like to see the countless emails that I sent people that were just ignored? Or I would reject stories. People would pitch things to me and I would say, I cannot on good conscience feature this on a Black website because all of your models are white and like people were just ignoring me. And so I'm like, I was fighting these fights, just not out there
Yeah.
to you. And that's what's often very difficult is like you're fighting invisible battles, but you have such a visible position. So everyone can see you, but they don't know what it is you're really going through. And that's really difficult.
I mentioned this a few months ago when talking with a friend that people feel like fighting racism or white supremacy is marching like Dr. King or or on the like Medgar Evers. It's like they expect it to be on a huge civil rights level as opposed to understanding that the system itself affects down lower than that, at the grocery store. If you're a cashier and you're working with a racist white cashier, or
Yeah.
in your position, you're like, I'm behind the scenes, but I'm also in front of the scenes. I'm fighting battles that may not be blown up on a billboard, but yet there was a battle being fought. And so I think that people need to understand that the battles, there are many battles, not just the big war all the time. It's the many battles that you have to fight daily so that the people that come after you don't have a big a war. And we can look at our own history as shared Black people, shared Black history, that the big wars have been fought for us. But there's still many more battles to fight because it hasn't ended and it's still very much prevalent.
Yeah.
What are the 3 lessons that you have learned navigating mainstream white world and Black America since confronting your position as a token Black girl?
Well, it's much preferred that you're quiet.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And it's a really hard lesson to learn too, because it's almost like directly antithetical to the like public facing messages that like institutions want to share. But they just don't want you to really speak about anything. And that's really hard. I would also say that the best thing that you can do is educate yourself. And of course, like sometimes that can feel like additional labor, but you can't ever take that away. Like you can't take away the fact that I know things and I'm like, I can't unknow them now.
Right.
So I think that's really important. And I would also say like finding community is really important. And it's worth it to do that. I think because of the way that I grew up, I was really intimidated by forming Black female friendships, and I didn't really have any until adulthood. And so I have to say that like those are the friendships and that's the community that has like saved me the most. So yeah.
I love that. I know we both have to go. So I want to end on a quote and how you feel about this quote again. Kendra Payne wrote an article called "Grew Up as the Token Black Kid. Here's how to reactivate your voice." And one of the things that happens with the token is that it's saying that that token Black kid's Black experience is less than, quote unquote, like a hood Black person. And so she's quoted saying, every experience is a Black experience unless it is anti-Black. So no matter how privileged you grew up or how impoverished you grew up or whatever, everything in between, that experience is a Black experience unless it is anti-Black. And what would you say to that quote?
I totally agree. And I think that like more than anything, what we fight in races when we fight racism is the fight for our own humanity and the fight for the spectrum of that. And so like, for example, when white people try to represent themselves in the media, they understand that they can have Succession on the air at the same time as Hillbilly Elegy, and we don't think that's more white, that's less white.
Yeah, yeah.
White. We understand that they can have a breadth of experiences, but it is only for other cultures that are not white that we try to
Mhm.
flatten that experience and say, no, this is the only one that you can have.
Mhm.
Really unfair because it's dehumanizing. And you can have many experiences, but yes, you have to be very careful that when you are having those many experiences, they are not anti-Black, because like what happens to tokenized children and some to some degree adults
Mhm.
is that they begin to kind of like parrot the things that like white people or like white supremacy thinks about their own community, which is essentially anti-Black or,
Mhm.
um, you know, discriminatory if you're from another race. So it's important to like understand that like we cannot do that either.
Right.
That, but like, yes, we should celebrate like all kinds of experiences and like let kids do whatever they want to do. I would hate it when people would be like, Black people don't ski.
You're like, yes, we do. I love it.
I'm like, yeah, you know how many times Black people don't play golf? Yeah, until there's Tiger Woods. Black people don't play tennis
Mhm.
until there's the Williams sisters. Like, and we
Mhm.
were playing golf and tennis and skiing and riding horses and doing all of that stuff.
All the things, but when the dominant culture doesn't present that as something that we do, then we're programmed to think that that is what the others do and not what we do.
Exactly. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it's very important to like then not become that tokenized person who's the only one and then emphasize like how different you are than everybody else.
Mhm.
Not either.
Right, right. And also, before we go, why should people go out and purchase Token Black Girl? I mean, I've been shouting it on the rafters that they should go purchase it. It is a great read. Your journey, your evolution, your understanding, your mistreatment, your empowerment, everything that you went through to get to the Danielle that we see today is why I say that they should get this book. But why do you think that they should get this book?
Well, there's so many reasons. First, it's beautiful and it looks great in your house. It's bright pink. It has like a holographic element to it. The hardcover does. It's got a Gabrielle Union blurb on the cover, which is amazing.
Yes.
Secondly, because I'll get royalty checks.
She's a fashion guru, guys. So she had to tell you about the aesthetics because
Yes,
it's so
it's
right.
beautiful. Yeah. Secondly, because I'll get royalty checks, and I
And we want this Black sister to get paid. Okay.
yes. And thirdly, because when books like this do well, it opens up opportunities for other people to be able to tell their stories. So much of like why it's very difficult for Black authors to get book deals, to get promotional opportunities, to get access to things is because they say, oh, people won't read that. They won't
Mhm.
buy it. It won't sell. And so therefore these publishing houses won't buy their books. And that means that we are not seeing enough diversity in publishing. And
Mhm.
it's this cycle that keeps going around. And the only way to break this cycle is to prove, hey, that is something we want to read. That is something we want to see, right? Like something
Mhm.
like Black Panther really proved that as well. Marvel
Mhm.
was very content just having the white superheroes for a very long time. And when Black Panther shattered box office records, they said, oh, we have to pay attention. This audience not only can appeal to itself, like we are appealing directly to the Black community, but it has wider appeal as well. And that is proof of concept. So if you want to do some good,
If you want to do some good to the Black race,
yeah,
then y'all need to go out and get Token Black Girl by Danielle Prescod. She is, as you can see, she is well spoken and she is also well written. It'll make you laugh. There were times when I was mad at her. I was mad at you a few times, Danielle.
that's okay. I was mad at
Okay,
you
but I
too.
forgave you.
But you know, I had to be really honest because I was like, it's not worth it to like take all that stuff out that I would if I
Mhm,
like was like, oh no, people aren't gonna like this about me.
mhm,
I'm not trying to be liked necessarily. I'm trying to be truthful.
Mm-hmm.
You have to say, like, even the ugly stuff sometimes.
Right. And that's what, to me, that's what sells, the raw authenticity of you. Like I said, I get really into books. I'm a nerd for
Yeah,
real.
yeah,
So like I said, there were points when I was upset, but there was the other part where I had to understand how you got to where you got. And so it was easy, and I think that's what we need in our community, to continue to have these nuanced conversations, to continue to understand others' nuanced experiences. Just understanding that I grew up in Michigan and you grew up New York, Connecticut, that's going to just be a completely different experience in itself. And so we should not be angry with one another, but just try to develop some understanding and embrace those differences.
yeah.
So, again, thank you for being a guest on today's show. Thank you for sharing your knowledge in your book. Thank you for your insight. And y'all, make sure y'all go to Amazon.com, put in Token Black Girl by Danielle Prescod, and make sure you order that book today. You will not be disappointed. Any last remarks, Miss Danielle?
No, thank you so much for having me and being so patient with scheduling. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.